decision to deport him. Obviously, this is a bit speculative, or very speculative at the moment. It's still before the courts. But how much of a risk is it for Novak Djokovic that this will not go his way?
Well, thank you, Tom. It's lovely to talk to you today. Novak is in a very difficult situation legally because the court does not have the ability to look at the whole of his case and whether he should be allowed to come and play in Australia. Rather, he's got to make out an error of law in his application to the court. So this is not a tribunal. The court, at the end of the day, cannot give him a visa. That's the first point to make. And he's got to show that there's something in the application of the law or in the way that he's been treated that is unlawful. It's possible that lower court could well find that there's been some legal error made. The problem that he faces, though, is that it would be in no way the end of the story, because at the end of a judicial review process, even if he wins, the government will go back and look at remaking the decision, and the resolution of the government at the moment appears to favour the view that, well, if we have to remake this decision, we will remake it according to the law, but he will still have to go. So I think he's in a very tricky situation, to be honest.
Challenging. So if his case doesn't stand up in court, and as I say, speculative, yes, we're talking hypotheticals, but if it doesn't stand up and he's deported from Australia, what consequences come with that? Can he be banned from coming back next year, for example? And on top of that, would he have trouble entering other countries, for instance? What are the broader consequences?
Yeah, look, I think this is all highly speculative and it's theoretical. In theory, yes, the law in Australia can allow for his exclusion for 3 years. Whether any government would exclude him, of course, he's a world number one player. It is another question entirely. But the law on its face, yes, would allow him to be excluded for 3 years. And once you have been excluded from one country, I like to tell my children this, don't get yourself a bad immigration record, because every other country will know about it straight away. But look, he is world number one, and that's high theory, to be honest.
So it is discretionary, though, is it? Like they can decide? Yeah, right. Yep.
It does. But look, I think the risk to Australia is just as great, if you want my candid view on this, because it's not a given that Australia can host the Grand Slams. You know, we may well find that the Australian Open moves offshore.
You think the stakes could be that high?
What is that he has been the whole on the plane. You don't do this 10 hours, someone else over the world on this. And
interview with the BBC on this. And he didn't have the documentation. That was the government's defence. I mean, his team reportedly applied for a visa that does not allow for medical exemptions. But can you explain a little further what we know at the moment about
offshore? That's right. It's quite the documentation. This is one of the risks that Novak false information or has applying for any other visa with. And what is known as immigration clearance that you tend to go to, that's the point at which you can be picked up. And such a high-profile player that they know about that.
This weekend, waiting for that court appearance. So, for example, life will be like over the next 48 to
on Twitter, and I think they start doing that. But with his mobile phone, he's able to communicate that he physically probably is in solitary confinement. The people from Nauru and Manus Island, the first questions that the judge asked.
Rules are rules, and everyone should be treated the same. That would not be something that's afforded to anyone.
Let through on exemptions. So it really is it's a big, particularly with the COVID numbers.
An extraordinary situation, and we'll be watching it closely. Thanks very much for your company this morning at ABC News Radio. We do have the latest COVID and 6 people have died.
Look, that was unacceptable. I just assumed not.
Squarely at the feet of Donald Trump, also
wrong. And I think it's time that I go.
And back home,
they're showing up to work as to do their normal.
At aged care residents, some burnt-out staff are seeing their states now, though a year ago today, Congress met to certify Joe Biden as some of those who instigated the violence have evaded punishment. This is President.
You can't obey the law only when it's convenient. Those who storm this Capitol and those who are at the throat of America, at America.
Concerns among some Republicans that conspiracy on the 6th of January, has this report.
It was a last-ditch attempt. Reporters marched from where he'd been giving a speech.
Scenes I'm looking at right now,
Politicians took cover in the chamber for hours.
I understand you've been speaking to some of the protesters.
I decided I'm going to get up to the front, and that's when they were losing their whole go inside because it was unprotected.
4 others died, including a police officer. Took their own lives in the aftermath. The operation left more than 6. All the condemnation around the world for the Republican congressmen and women and senators.
He is charged in the article of impeachment.
It was Congressman Peter Meijer.
I certainly thought, humoring things that maybe they didn't believe, but that comfort to political violence, that would force.
Critics of Donald Trump and his involvement in the storming of the Capitol, supporting section of the party.
Part of the beat of that drum, and I'm
than that, in Michigan, where he's standing for re-election as a congressman later, called his criticism of Donald Trump a betrayal. Other Republicans, their support for continued refusal to accept the election result of take Joe Kent of Washington State a couple of months ago in support
of the Republican Party. I believe the America First, the establishment for 1 minute.
You don't think that some people would have looked?
People that did, and I think a lot of those folks now regret that. Anybody who acted violently, if they acted violently on that day, I got nothing for it.
Trump has, perhaps unsurprisingly, found the majority of Republican voters
provoked by the president and other.
In the days following the attack, when members of the White House stopped funding politicians that questioned the election result, but the dismay of Congressman Peter Meijer.
If it wouldn't have been 5 people, violence, I think it's a sad thing, too much to sweep away.
Republican Congress. Time for sport now with Daniel Garb. Dan, good morning. Look, just quickly.
On News Radio earlier on in this hour, and you will a bit more later on. A fellow 20-time Grand Slam winner weighed in on normal that people here in Australia get very frustrated with the job. Even what the people who know about medicine say, and if the people say that we need to get, and that option is applying for an exemption. I don't like the situation that is happening now for a number of months, and he made his own decision. So,
news on the court, there's been another big
last night, who was a very talented player, ranked Daniel Medvedev of Russia, but with help from that win from Dimonor, but won't get. Janovic knocked out of the Adelaide, was knocked out by Victoria Azarenka, a 2-time winner.
At the SCG in the meantime.
Night without losing a wicket, so Hamid and Crawley moment, but hopefully it can clear up, and star bowler is hopeful they can turn it around.
That little bit's ticked off, but we want to.
Dan, while we've got you there, just a rare loss.
Affected on the Gold Coast, total in 17 overs, 4-point buffer on the top, but Andu took 4 for 22 for Sean Marsh with a half century.
Much back in half an hour with more. The SCG doesn't want to hear a top of 28. 29, it's 23 now. For Hobart, rain and a possible rain. Very hot and sunny. Daylight time is 5:30 time.
Kerry Worthington with ABC News. Home of time he chooses. The visa was until that he didn't meet the end.
Responsibility to make sure that they have in place all the necessary, particularly in relation to Mr. John.
11 deaths. Hospitalisations have risen to recorded 21,728. Workers have warned the sector is in crisis after their carers tested positive and were
know whether to attend their shifts and support services. It's a daily need. There's a significant worry and risk
of a COVID close contact as 6 COVID cases were recorded yesterday. Become far too relaxed.
We need to come out of nowhere. It's been plucked out of thin air, really, with a positive person.
Dozens of Middle East correspondent.
Buildings and police vehicles. Across the country, internet has been shut, continuing to rise. What began this week as frustration. Tom Joyner, ABC News.
Christmas decorations. Officials say the vehicle was left due to turf wars among rival gangs, with more than 1,000 literature as part of a suspended.
Downloaded nearly 70,000 missing material likely to be useful to a. He told the judge that he in 6 months. The Attorney General.
That's the latest ABC News. You can get news.
Harry, and it's great to have your company this Friday, the 7th. News tennis star Novak Djokovic in of treating him like a criminal. We'll have more on his predecessor, Donald Trump, of posing a continued state's COVID caseload soars. Extraordinary story that seems to be which is being held. Refugee advocates have used the detention centre for dozens of asylum in Australia, while his application at this point. For more, we're staying. Tom, thanks for joining us. Sounds like
it's have returned to the city now, the hotel where Djokovic of the Serbian star Novak Djokovic. There were of the hotel and 11 people in relation to that protest. This morning it's relatively peaceful. Well, there was a hearing in the till Monday because that we heard in court yesterday. It's expected that quote unquote the tail will over this weekend, but there is the country.
Really extraordinary situation in all this.
Vucic, who player, his Serbian star, and Novak Djokovic, and his father is politically its knees, unquote, and this morning who disputed that said that well and truly become an issue beyond more